Okay, I wanted to start today by sharing something that happened when we were on pilgrimage in Thailand. When we were at Wat Sattawee and Longpor Ganha was giving a Dhamma talk. He came out and he said, lay people cannot be Arahants because lay people are attached to their family and they are attached to their country. And I remember sitting there in the audience looking at him and thinking, so what you're saying is lay people can be Arahants. Because he did not say lay people cannot be arahants because they are lay people. He said lay people cannot be arahants because they have attachments. And I remember sitting there thinking, well, I definitely have attachments to my family, but I was looking around my inner world, looking, searching if I had attachments to my country, and I really could not find it. And that really meant to me that if I could put down one attachment that supposedly all lay people have, then why on earth can I not put down all the attachments eventually? It was like Longfor Gunha was saying, a square cannot be a circle because it has four corners. Well, what happens if you round out the four corners and you make sure that the diameter of the shape is the same all the way around? What shape is it then? Can we not all be circles? So today I wanted to talk about some of the attachments that supposedly lay people just can never put down, and these attachments that will forever hold lay people back from being arahants. And I just don't believe it. So I wanted to share some stories of how I worked through some of these attachments and loosened some of these attachments. And I wanted to really share my experience because I do not know precisely what anybody else needs in their practice to put down any of their attachments, but I can really share what I did to loosen some of my attachments. So that's the plan for today. And the first thing I want to start off with is attachment to food and sensual pleasure. And I actually wanted to share another story that we heard that was shared by one of the monks from Wat Sattawee. He said that one morning he was drinking his morning coffee and really enjoying it, just really loving the flavor and the taste. And Longpor Ganha kind of points to him and says, you have sex with your coffee. And this monk is like, what the heck? And Longpor Ganha says, yeah, every time you have your coffee, you go, mm-hmm. And the monk goes on to tell all these stories about how one by one, Longpor Ganha invites him, encourages him, challenges him to renounce all of his favorite foods, from eggs to pizza to baked goods. And that is one really great way to practice with putting down attachments. I remember going on a retreat, my first residential retreat, and really just for fun. It was a 5 precept retreat, but I decided to forego food after noon anyway. And it was so freeing and fun to discover that I didn't need as much food as I thought I did, and that it could be really helpful to meditation, and I just didn't need it. So renunciation is a great way to practice. And I think, that's how the monastics practice. Why can't we also practice that too a little bit as lay people? But it's also not the only way to practice with sensual pleasure. And I remember when I was 19, I had this internship in LA and I was so miserable. I was unhappy at work. I was like really just ignored, neglected, and shoved into the corner, the intern that nobody wanted to mentor and nobody wanted to think about. So I was miserable at work. I was subletting a room in a frat house. So that was chaotic after work. And really just lonely and unfulfilled and drifting in my life. And I decided the one way that I would make myself happy was to download a list of 99 things you must eat in LA before you die. This was written by one of the biggest food critics in Los Angeles. So it was 99 restaurants with 99 dishes. And I was like, I'm going to eat my way through the city. And this is going to be the way that I make my summer worth it. And at first, it was very fun. Okay, lots of shrimp tacos, lots of paella. But as I made my way through the internship and as I made my way through the months and as I made my way through that list of 99 places to eat before I die, the food just started to turn to like sludge in my mouth. Like none of it tasted good anymore because none of it could fill that void of loneliness and unfulfillment in my heart. And I really discovered in my body through realization that food cannot satisfy me. Food just turns to poop in the end. And if you eat enough of a food, it just all turns to sludge in your mouth. At least in my mouth, it did. And I think that was a really great example to me of how Nibbida can also free us from our attachments, engaging with something and really asking, does this make me happy in a way that I see something in the chat? Uh, yes, to the chat. Yes, to the private chat. I will attend to the chat later, but I will attend to it. Okay. Okay. Nibbida. Okay, the Pali word, often translated as disgust or disenchantment. What a powerful tool. What a good friend in our practice, in our journey. The question that we can ask ourselves as we engage with all these sensual pleasures, if you are still attached to them, the question can be, does this make me happy in a way that does not diminish? Does this make me happy in a way that sustains? Does this make me happy each time I return to it? What a good friend. What a powerful tool in our practice. One more thing I wanted to say about sensual pleasure, and so far I've been talking about food, which is a beautiful taste, but I had this really interesting experience working with beautiful sounds, so music. And I think a lot of times in practice communities, people assume that everybody loves music and can't stop listening to music, and that it's so hard to put down music and not listen to music. And I think that it could have been easy for me to hide behind that assumption because I grew up with a lot of negative conditioning around music. I had 10 years of formal training in piano, 6 years in violin. I did a lot of intense music exams growing up. I played in piano competitions and did pretty well. And all of this made me really dislike music, and particularly live music and particularly classical music, to the point where if I walked through a mall and there was someone at a Nordstrom's playing piano, like it made me want to scream and maybe shove the piano player off their bench. Okay. So if I had just hidden behind this teaching of don't listen to music, don't play music, I would have always still had this attachment to music because my attachment was not, I have to listen to this, I want to listen to beautiful sound. It was, I hate music. So actually, the way that I really needed to practice with music was to teach myself and teach my body that it wasn't going to hurt me, and to take a couple of private voice lessons with this really sweet, gentle teacher. And through that interaction and through reteaching myself that music wasn't awful, music wasn't something that made me want to just claw my eyeballs out, that that was the way that I needed to loosen that attachment. So it's not necessarily just drop everything. It's not necessary that it's not necessarily that every attachment we have is something that we need to interact with and realize that it's actually realize that it's actually not full of pleasure. Sometimes it's also interacting with something and realizing that it's not full of pain and that it's not going to hurt us. And ultimately, all of it is just empty phenomenon. Whether it's food that turns to sludge in our mouth or music that is actually not going to hurt me when I sing, when I play it, it's all just empty phenomenon. And also, if you listen to the Arahants, they also talk about enjoying things sometimes, depending on the Arahant. But, Ajahn Sumedho, who I'm sure we all are aware on this call, that is widely respected as an Arahant, and I think very clear is an Arahant. He talks about enjoying food, how he really looks forward to his meals. And it's all empty phenomenon. We can enjoy pleasure the way an Arahant might enjoy it. The same way that when I see a low-hanging cloud floating across a swift breeze, it's just really fun to admire it for a second and to watch it fall apart. We can enjoy things in that way. Right. I think that's all I want to say about food and music. Let's talk about money. So, in Stillness Flowing, there's this really fun anecdote where Ajahn Chah is talking about how you can't put down money for as long as you use it. And there's this visiting monk, I believe, who says, well, why can't you just use it without attachment? And if I remember correctly, Ajahn Chah says, that is like licking salt and not tasting it. Oh, and as a quick aside, Stillness Flowing, before I read it, I was intimidated because it's like this thick of a book, but it's extremely readable. I laughed out loud multiple times, and it is so full of wisdom. So if the thickness of the book intimidates you, I would encourage you to look past it because it is juicy delicious. Anyway, back to the anecdote. He said, you can't put down money while you use it. It's like licking salt and not tasting it. And yet that is not impossible. I remember when I had COVID and I tried to eat peanut butter and I was like, not tasting anything. And it was just glue in my mouth. It is possible, not likely, but possible. So putting down money. I want to start by saying that when I had my first full-time job, I was 23. I was living and working in New York City at a company where many people were extremely wealthy, and I was woefully underpaid. I was verbally abused on a daily basis by the other people in my job. I was asked to work through the weekend and to work through the night for weeks at a time. And then on Monday morning, the executives would walk in and talk about how they leisurely tried making mole for the first time that weekend. So during that phase of my life, I held on tight to every single dollar that I had. And I don't think it's impossible to work with attachment in that situation. But for me, I was so extremely attached to money in that situation because it's all I had, I felt. I was alone in New York City. My entire family was back in California. I was so miserable at work. I was so miserable outside of work. People in New York City are not known for being warm and kind, and I was experiencing that firsthand. In that situation, like it just made me clench harder and tighter to every single cent. And I do think it was powerful to just start making a livable wage. I think in Stillness Flowing, there's a story about how poor people were in the environment when Ajahn Chah was teaching, and especially when he was first starting out as a teacher. And there was a story where one day after alms round, the monks only got 3 bananas from the villagers nearby, and they had to split this between 10 monks. So they sliced very thin slices of banana, and everybody just had a bite of banana that day for all their food for one day. It was just banana, one bite. But I think it was really wise and smart of Ajahn Jayasaro to include in the writing of that book that it was like that for everybody in the village. Like everybody in the village was not getting by on much. And I think compared to that situation I just described in New York City, where I was surrounded by really wealthy people who were just extremely toxic, I do think it is harder to let down attachment to money in that situation. However, if you are in that situation right now, I invite you to prove me wrong. Do it. Okay. What else about money? Yeah, very powerful to start making enough and not feel like I had to guard every cent and every dollar. And I know that this is a really generous community that practices a lot of dana. So I don't need to dwell on Dhamma much, but I do want to say that in other communities, and when I hear other, particularly lay teachers, talk about Dhamma, there is this transactional feeling to it. Like the teacher gives us a good teaching, so we give them money and help pay for their rent, help pay for their transportation to get here. And this is a fine way to practice dana. There's nothing wrong with that. And to me, it's still feeding into the hamster wheel of capitalism and the hamster wheel of samsara. And the way that I practice dana that I love the most and opens my heart the most, and I feel helps me break out of that hamster wheel, is at the end of the Dhamma teaching, when it's time to give, I ask my heart, what number will help you open the most today? And that is the number that I give. And, you know, my heart talks to my mind. So I'm not going to give a number that is going to cause me pain when it's time to pay rent. But that is the way that I practice. That isn't about transaction and is really just about opening the heart and giving for my sake. What else about money? Yeah, giving. And giving more than one thinks is possible to give because of love, I think is really powerful. There was my practice just changed when I gave my life savings away to my partner, basically to pay off their lifetime of student loan debt. And to be able to do that and know that we could still look after ourselves and give monthly payments to this big number of debt and still be okay. And to know that our love is more important than money, that was really powerful. And then something else happened at work where I had to choose between money and morality, basically. Okay, so here's what happened. I had a manager come to me and say, okay, you know that person over there? She's not really doing a good job. We think you could do her job better. So if you want, I can give you a promotion. You can take her job. I'll give you a lot more money. And in the moment, there was this part of me that was really excited about saying yes. There was a part of me that felt sad to see that coworker potentially go. I did really enjoy this coworker. I think the precept of not taking what is not freely given really came to my mind. I think this would not be classified as stealing in our culture. And I think that, in fact, a lot of people would be highly encouraging to say yes, especially as a femme person of color. I think a lot of people would have said, like, you take up your space, you take what is offered, you take as much as you can get. And I remember in the moment, I said I would be very excited by this opportunity. But then as I sat with what happened, and even knowing that there was nothing particularly wrong with that situation, nothing even that stands out as immoral in that situation, I really thought of the precept of not taking what is not freely given. And sure, it was freely given by my managers, by the leadership at my work, but it wasn't freely given by everybody. I think that person over there, if she knew what was happening, she would have preferred to keep her job. And even though I knew that there was nothing explicitly wrong with the situation, it also really didn't feel like it was perfectly right. And it didn't feel like I was only taking what was freely given by everybody. So I went back to my manager and I said, if you really decide that the best thing for the team is for me to take on this person's responsibilities, I would be happy. And if you decide that what's best, and then if everybody who wanted to keep their job got to keep their job, I would be very, very, very happy. And this person got to keep their job for a lot longer. Nobody else at my work found out about the situation. And I could brush my teeth at night looking into the mirror and knowing that I practiced that precept to the very best of my ability in body, speech, and mind. And that is my favorite way to practice the precepts, not looking at them as a set of rules to follow or not follow, but as a challenge and an invitation to follow them to the very, very best of my ability in body, speech, and mind. Hi, nice to see you. And I do think that if we really follow the precepts, 5 precepts even, if we open our heart to them completely and really just cannonball into the crucible of these 5 precepts and allow them to change our hearts, open our hearts, then I really think that these 5 precepts are enough to take anybody all the way to Nibbana. Because if you do not wish death, practice death, kill anybody in body, speech, or mind, then there would be no ill will. If you do not take what's freely given, do not take anything unless it's freely given in body, speech, or mind, then there would be no greed. And if you do not lie in body, speech, or mind in any way, then there would be no delusion. If you do not engage in intoxicants in any single way, body, speech, or mind, then to me, that's saying that you love, cherish, treasure, and protect the clarity of mind that can come from that so much that you would not tarnish it even for 1 second. And that's all I have to say about money. I have some more thoughts on putting down some other things, but I think I can save them for next week and we can stop the talk here. And I wonder if anybody has any thoughts, if anybody believes or not believes that lay people can or cannot be arahants. I would be really curious. If there are any attachments that you're really proud of yourself for putting down, or any attachments that you're struggling to put down. These are all things that I would love to hear, as well as anything else that you feel like sharing. And Amber saying the audio of stillness flowing is available on YouTube for those intimidated by the size. Perfect. Thank you for sharing, Amber. Yes, Adrian.
Thank you. Thanks, Grace. It's a really interesting topic. Uh, and I think discussing it amongst like lay people is also it's quite a rare opportunity, maybe as well. So yeah, it's interesting to reflect on. And I don't know, I feel like you mostly hear that lay people could maybe there's like anagami is kind of the kind of main like thing or but then it's kind of I've heard other teachers say it's quite fuzzy because it's like well you could become an arahant but then you would immediately want to ordain and it's like because there would just be no reason not to kind of thing so I don't know um and I feel like it's a long way off anyway so that's okay I don't need to worry too much but I think it's interesting about like yeah just the investigation of attachments and desires and using the practice in whichever form you have to investigate those and to see where the attachment is. And like you were saying, like with music, like is it an attachment for like desire or is it attachment of like ill will and aversion? And like, I don't know, using those things skillfully without overly, yeah, attaching or overly like pushing. And it reminds me of when a little while after we came, well, actually a couple of weeks after we came back from the um, Thailand pilgrimage, um, and I was working as the Christmas elf, and I was really busy. Uh, yeah, I kind of went because it was that time of year, and I was working long hours and stuff, and you sent me the recording of the Happiness is Here and Now song, which is like a Plum Village Thich Nhat Hanh song. And that was like that helped to like get me through my commutes and my days. Like, and it's like a skillful way to use music and to use, I don't know, because it was kind of, it's very like Dhamma related. Um, so yeah, I feel like it's a complex topic that I don't know, it's not it's all to do with like how you hold things, right? And it's just the investigating it is very um in a lot of ways it's very like individual, like case by case, and I feel like that's kind of what the suttas are saying. It's you really have to investigate your own heart. But yeah, I appreciated the uh reflections today. Thank you.
For sure. And in Stillness Flowing, there was a conversation that Ajahn Chah was having with one of his followers. And one of his followers were saying, like, oh, look at all the ways that people can chant or use music in ways that are wholesome. And Ajahn Chah was like, yes, but there's no music that is more beautiful than peace in your heart, something like that. And like, that's a high bar, right? But then what if your heart is in misery and stress? And that's like maybe too high of a bar to jump toward and touch in that moment. You know, it can be hop a little bit and get to joy. So, oh, and one more thing that you were saying with this idea that if a lay person became an arahant, they would immediately ordain. I can see a lot of reasoning behind that. And actually, one thing I wanted to bring to today's conversation is also this talk I heard that an interview between the Tibetan Buddhist nun who lived in the cave for 12 years. She gave an interview to the Clear Mountain Monastery brothers. I think her name is Tenzin Palmo, if I remember correctly. Maybe if one of you know, you can confirm or deny. But she was saying, like, you know, at the time of the Buddha, there was this ocean of difference between lay people and monastics. And that dichotomy is getting more and more blurry. So a couple of examples I remember her giving were at the time, like if you were not a monastic, you would not get the education in Dhamma that is required to have a lot of progress in our human lifetimes. But now, like, look at all of us spending our Saturdays talking about the Dhamma. Like, we all have, I think, I would hazard a guess to say that we all have the education to access Sutta Central whenever we want, the internet access to access the suttas whenever we want, and to read them and to understand them, especially with the guidance of the ayahs behind us and with us. We have access to really great teachers. We have access to Arahants. Like anybody can log in to the Tuesday question and answer sessions with Ajahn Suchart. I would recommend a little bit of caution if you do, because he is a spicy Arahant. I can give examples if you want. But we all have access to Arahants. You can ask an Arahant question anytime you want. If you keep going, he will start to recognize you and ask you about your life and ask you, like, hey, how's your health? Have you thought about ordaining yet? When are you going to come and ordain? He's going to ask you those questions. Another thing that the nun said in that interview about the difference between lay people and monastics, especially many centuries ago, is that lay people worked from dawn till midnight. You know, they worked all their hours of the day doing manual labor, just doing hard things that kept the mind very occupied. And only monastics would have time to meditate and reflect. However, here we are meditating and reflecting. And I think it really depends, like how much, even as a lay person, like do you have the discipline? Do you have the dedication? I like that word better. The dedication to reflect on practice and to meditate. And you know, in one of my previous jobs at work, they opened a meditation room, and they said that anyone who's not occupied on a task can go there. And I had a really great relationship with my manager. So I would finish my tasks really quick in the morning. And then I'd be like, okay, goodbye. I'm going to go meditate. And I would be in there for like 2 or more hours a day sometimes. And I would come back from work and Kyle would give me a hug and say, how was your day? And I'd be like, oh, very good. So it's possible. There's the question in the chat, who is the Arahant you mentioned? Ajahn Suchart. Yes. You can find details, I think, on his website and on his Facebook group, which is not managed by him, but managed by volunteers, on how to get into those Zoom sessions. Catherine?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Um, so yeah, this is the question of, practicing as a lay person, something that I guess I've been thinking about a lot recently because I think it started with a talk by Ayesen Dusko about refuge, and she was talking about making your home a refuge. Um, and then in another train of thought, I was thinking about my son who's 10 and thinking, oh, just all the terrible ideas of what may happen in the future, and your mind goes down that track of will they be okay? I'm thinking, oh, wouldn't it be amazing if, like Arius Santuska, one day he was a monk and I was a nun, and that would be some beautiful, beautiful future. Um, and then thinking, like, actually, I am in my home practicing, and here is my son in my home being himself. And what's this huge difference? Like, obviously, he probably won't be in my home forever and ever. But in this moment, what's the difference between this now, me practicing here in my home with my child around, and that fantastical imagining place of us all being somehow being in monasteries practicing. And I guess just feeling very lucky because I haven't worked for 2 years due to illness, which sometimes has felt like a terrible thing. And now I just feel like it's this huge blessing because there's a lot to work with, but I'm never in a situation where someone's standing over me saying, you must do this task now, you have to get on with it to such an extent with such stress and pressure that I can't do it mindfully. Obviously, I do lots of things not mindfully because it happens. But yeah, I just have this like endless capacity to practice. And I have these people around me who I love, and it just feels very much like I have this opportunity to almost like being in a monastery in terms of the constraints I have. And like you say, is availability of so much teaching and by the internet. Yeah.
I love that. I think when you said, what is the difference? I love that. Is I think, there are people in monasteries who it's hard to tell because I'm not them, but perhaps not every single person who dwells in a monastery is practicing with complete sincerity. Okay. I would just hazard a guess out of all the thousands, maybe millions of people who are at monasteries right now. And then I think there are people who are lay people and not at monasteries who are practicing with stunning, beautiful sincerity in practice and complete dedication in the heart. And I think it's not really about what you see on the outside. It's who cares about the window dressing. It's really what's in the heart. And that is something that we can all only discern for ourselves. Thank you, Catherine. On the subject of practicing at work, when there are really demanding bosses making a lot of really fun demands all the time, I also wanted to share something else that really jumped out to me from Stillness Flowing, which is the idea of Toraman. If you read the book for yourself, look out for the section on Toraman. It's one of my favorites. So Toraman is a Thai word, and traditionally it described a method of training that was really old school. Like if you think of like old school kung fu masters who made people carry buckets up and down a long flight of stairs, it's like kind of that vibe. Okay, people who like the Zen masters who whack you on the head, kind of that vibe. And now the word Toraman, apparently, there was a footnote in Stillness Flowing. It has evolved to just mean torture in Thai. So it's like that intense. So it was a way for teachers such as Ajahn Chah to like stir up people's suffering so they could see it clearly and learn how to put it down. So here's a couple examples. If all the monks were doing a lot of hard labor in the middle of a hot, humid summer Thai summer afternoon, then typically there would be a break in the middle of the work session and someone would bring out some ice cold drinks and just everybody have a few minutes to put down their work and enjoy. But once in a while, he would have the monk who brought out the ice cold drinks bring them out and then just not dismiss anybody to take a break. So all the monks would just see the ice cold drinks out of the corner of their eye and it would torture them. And the intention was that as the monks kept staring at the ice cold, delicious drinks, hopefully they would notice that for as long as they kept thinking like, oh, I really want that drink. Oh, I really want that break. It would cause a lot of suffering. But oftentimes the monks would realize, oh, I can just let the ice cold drinks be there. The break will happen when it happens. I will get to the drink when I get to the drink. And then there would be peace in their heart. And it was really funny for me to read Stillness Flowing and to hear about all these monks who were like, oh my gosh, like it is really rare to come upon a real Toramon master because life itself is a Toramon master. Life itself will show me an ice cold drink in the corner of my eye and I can't have it for some reason. My bosses at work, all the hard bosses I've ever had have been my Toramon masters and have really been a source of great practice for me in that way also. Okay, if nothing else then, I wanted to say one more thing before I stop the recording. Two more things. Next time we will continue this discussion about sex and family, putting down loosening attachments to sex and family. Okay, and then the other thing is I just wanted to put out a call for help because the Ayahs are going on retreat in early 2026. And if anybody has time to help, anybody who's local, or if anybody has any skills that might be useful, please reach out to the Ayahs. If you are not local and just want to help in some way, I'm sure it wouldn't hurt to reach out to the Ayahs either. And I especially have this wish in my heart that Ayah Chitananda gets 10 days out of the whole year to not worry about anything and just immerse into practice. And I think if anyone has like stayed with the Ayahs or even just followed them around for a day, you will see how hard the Ayahs work. And if you have not, I think it is very easy for the human mind to see 2 days when they offer public offerings on the Karuna Buddhist Vihara homepage and think, oh, they must just meditate for the other 5 days of the week. But they work so hard. They meet with people constantly and give spiritual counseling in a way that changes people's lives, has completely changed my life. They are so attentive. They give just completely selflessly and open-handedly. And besides meeting with people, like the enormous amount of work it takes to build out the hermitage, which I think will benefit people for generations to come, it's a lot. So if there's anything we can do out of the whole year, they don't get days off, but I really dream, hope, and wish that Ayatollah gets 10 days off, 10 days to really not worry about anything. Let's make it happen. Okay, now you can stop the recording.